Imagine being treated like an unwanted stranger by your own family, especially on a special day. Now, imagine that the people who hurt you actually work for you, and they have no idea. This is my story, a tale of unfairness, a secret truth, and how true respect is earned, not bought. I stood at the door of a fancy party place in Chicago, holding a gift for my grandson Tommy's 5th birthday. My daughter-in-law, Indigo, was whispering to a security guard, pointing right at me. The look in her eyes was not just annoyance, it was full of hate. "Ma'am, I have to ask you to leave," the guard said. He looked sorry, but his voice was firm. He was young, about my son Marcus's age. I could tell he didn't like doing this. "I'm sorry. There must be a mistake," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm Tommy's grandmother. This is my grandson's party." Then Indigo's voice cut through the noise of the party like a sharp knife. "No mistake here, Tirama Kafona." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear, using a foreign language, like she always did when she wanted to be especially mean. "Remove this tacky old woman from here." The talking around us stopped. Some guests turned to stare. Parents with their children, neighbors, Marcus's co-workers, all of them watched as my own family had me let out like a criminal. My hands shook as I held Tommy's gift tighter. Through the crowd, I could see him in his little superhero costume, completely unaware of what was happening. He was laughing, running around with the other children, beautiful and innocent, not knowing that his mother was making sure I couldn't even wish him a happy birthday. "Indigo, please," I managed to say, stepping closer to her. She wore an expensive dress that cost more than most people earn in a month. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. Everything about her screamed wealth and high status. "It's Tommy's birthday. I just want to give him his present." She looked at me like I was something dirty she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "You're embarrassing yourself, Norma. Look around." She waved her hand at the fancy room, the perfect tables, the expensive flowers. "This isn't your kind of place. These aren't your kind of people." Her words hit me hard, like physical punches. Not my kind of place. Not my kind of people. I was wearing my best dress, the dark blue one I had bought just for special days like this. I had done my hair, put on makeup, even bought new shoes. But it seemed none of that mattered to Indigo. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, looking for my son. "Where's my son?" "Oh, he's busy with important guests," Indigo said, her voice fake sweet. "People who actually belong here." The security guard looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I really need you to come with me," he said gently as he guided me toward the exit. I saw Marcus across the room. He was laughing with a group of men in expensive suits, completely unaware of what was happening to his own mother. Or maybe he knew and simply didn't care. That thought made my chest hurt with a pain I hadn't felt since my husband died 15 years ago. "My gift," I said weakly, still holding the wrapped package. "Leave it on the table by the door." Indigo called out carelessly. "Someone will make sure Tommy gets it." But I knew she was lying. I knew that gift would end up in the trash, just like I was being thrown out. As the security guard walked me to the parking lot, I heard Indigo's voice behind us. She was already moving on, already forgetting I existed. "Sorry about that, everyone. Some people just don't know their place." I sat in my old Honda Civic for 20 minutes before I could stop shaking enough to drive. The joke of it all was almost too much to bear. Indigo, standing there in her expensive dress in that fancy place, surrounded by luxury and high status, telling me I didn't belong. If only she knew the truth. If only she knew that every dollar paying for that party, every bit of money funding their comfortable life, every penny keeping that family going came from me. The company where Marcus worked as a regional manager, where Indigo held her fancy marketing director job, where half the guests at that party got their paychecks. I owned it all. Wellington Industries. 43 years of hard work, sweat, and sacrifice, built from nothing after my husband died, and left me with a house loan, a young son, and only $57 in our bank account. I had started with a small cleaning job and built it into a huge business worth $42 million. And I had done it all in secret, keeping my ownership hidden behind many layers of company names and management groups. I never wanted Marcus to feel weighed down by his mother's success. I wanted him to make his own way in the world. I wanted him to earn his job because he was good at it, not because of who his mother was. So I stayed in the shadows, living simply in my small house, driving my old car, shopping at cheap stores, all while my company provided good lives for hundreds of employees, including my own family. The family that had just thrown me out like trash. I started the car and drove home slowly, my mind racing. For years, I had put up with Indigo's quiet cruelty, her comments about my looks, my house, my life. I had bitten my tongue when she made jokes about my simple ways and how little I understood their fancy world. I had stayed quiet when she questioned my ability to watch Tommy properly, when she made it clear that I wasn't the kind of grandmother she wanted for her son. But this was different. This was war. She wanted to see what happened when she pushed too far. She wanted to find out what it felt like to upset the wrong person. Well, tomorrow morning, she was going to get her wish. Tomorrow morning, Wellington Industries was going to have some very needed changes. The Wellington Industries building stood 42 stories tall in the middle of Chicago's business area. Every morning for the past 15 years, I had driven past it on my way to the grocery store or the doctor's office, looking up at the shiny glass and steel building that carried my name. I felt a quiet pride that no one else could understand. My employees knew me as Mrs. Wellington, the owner who liked to work through other people. The few who had met me in person knew I valued my privacy more than anything. What they didn't know was that Mrs. Wellington and Norma Martinez, Marcus's embarrassing mother, were the same person. I had built this huge business from nothing, and I had done it the hard way after Roberto died. I was 39 years old with a 12-year-old son and no real job skills. Roberto had been a good man, but he was old-fashioned. He handled the money, the bills, the business choices. I took care of Marcus and the house. When that heart attack took him, I realized I didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. The life insurance money lasted 8 months. Then I was on my own. I started cleaning office buildings at night. Marcus would stay with my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, while I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms. The work was hard, but it was honest, and it paid enough to keep us fed and housed. But I was ambitious. I would watch the daytime workers in those offices, see how they did things, listen to their talks about business deals and contracts. I started asking questions, learning how things worked. Within 2 years, I had my own cleaning job. Within 5 years, I had a team of 12 people working for me. I put every penny back into the business. No new clothes, no fancy dinners, no vacations. Every dollar went back into the business. I learned about business property, about managing buildings, about services for companies. I studied at night after Marcus went to bed, taking courses by mail in business management and accounting. By the time Marcus finished high school, I owned the cleaning jobs for half the office buildings in downtown Chicago. By the time he finished college, I had started new businesses in property management and company services. By the time he got married, Wellington Industries was worth $28 million. And through it all, Marcus never knew. I wanted him to have a normal childhood, a normal teenage life. I didn't want him growing up thinking he was special because his mother was successful. I wanted him to earn his own way, to build his own character without the comfort of family money. So I kept living in our simple house in the old neighborhood. I kept driving used cars and shopping at cheap stores. I kept being just Marcus's mother, the widow who worked hard to make ends meet. When Marcus finished business school, I made sure Wellington Industries had an opening in their management training program. Not because he was my son, but because he was qualified. I watched from the shadows as he worked his way up through the company, getting promotions, building his career. I was so proud of him, and he never knew his success was happening in his mother's company. Then he married Indigo. From the very beginning, she made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her idea of the family. Marcus had done well for himself, earning a good salary as a regional manager. Indigo had her own job as a marketing director, bringing in another good paycheck. Together, they could afford the life she wanted, the expensive apartment, the designer clothes, the fancy restaurants. But I wasn't fancy enough for their world. I wasn't educated enough, wasn't polished enough, wasn't rich enough. At least, that's what she thought. I put up with her comments about my small house and my simple ways. I bit my tongue when she made jokes about my cheap clothes and my lack of culture. I stayed quiet when she questioned whether I was able to properly care for Tommy during the rare times she allowed me to babysit. What hurt the most was watching Marcus change. The boy who used to curl up in my lap to watch movies, who brought me flowers he had picked from the neighbor's yard, who told everyone his mom was the strongest person in the world, slowly became someone who seemed ashamed of me. He never stood up for me when Indigo made her mean comments. He never spoke up when she found excuses to leave me out of family gatherings. He just stood by and watched as his wife slowly pushed his mother out of their lives. The turning point came 6 months ago at Christmas dinner. Indigo had insisted on having it at their apartment, even though my house had always been the usual gathering place. When I arrived with homemade tamales and a carefully wrapped present for Tommy, she barely noticed me. "Oh, Norma," she said, her voice fake sweet. "You didn't need to bring anything. We have everything ordered." She took my dish and immediately put it in the refrigerator, making it clear it wouldn't be served with the expensive food she had ordered. During dinner, the talk was all about their recent trip to a fancy wine area, their plans to fix up the apartment, Indigo's promotion at work. I sat quietly, trying to talk to Tommy, watching my son laugh and smile with his wife, while barely looking at me. When Tommy opened presents, he was polite about the handmade wooden truck I had spent weeks making for him, but his attention quickly turned to the expensive electronic toys his parents had bought. Indigo made a show of thanking me for the cute little toy, her tone suggesting it was something old-fashioned, but not really needed. As I got ready to leave that night, I overheard Indigo talking to Marcus in the kitchen. "Next year, maybe we should plan a trip somewhere for Christmas, just the three of us. It would be nice to start our own traditions without having to worry about fitting everyone in." Marcus's reply was barely heard, but I heard enough. That might be nice. A change of pace. I let myself out without saying goodbye, and neither of them noticed I was gone. That was when I realized they weren't just ignoring me. They were actively planning to remove me from their lives. And the cruelest part was that they were using money I had provided through the company I had built to pay for their comfortable life, while they steadily kept me out of it. But yesterday at Tommy's party, Indigo had crossed a line she couldn't undo, having me physically removed from my own grandson's birthday party, calling me tacky and embarrassing in front of many people, treating me like I was some unwanted person. She wanted to play games with people's lives. She wanted to use her supposed high place and status to shame those she thought were beneath her. Well, it was time for her to learn that some games have results she never could have imagined. I sat in my home office at 6 a.m. the morning after the party, looking at the company charts and employee files spread across my desk. Wellington Industries had over 800 workers in 12 different parts. Marcus worked in commercial property management. Indigo worked in company marketing. Both of them reported to managers who reported to higher-ups who finally reported to me. Neither of them had any idea they were working for the tacky old woman they had thrown out of their son's birthday party. Neither of them realized that every comfortable part of their life existed because of my kindness and protection. But they were about to learn what happened when you bit the hand that fed you. I picked up the phone and dialed my high-level manager, David Chun, Mrs. Chen's son, the boy who used to play with Marcus when they were children, now a successful businessman who knew exactly who I was and what I was able to do. "David," I said when he answered, my voice steady and cold. "It's time to make some changes." David Chun had been like a second son to me. His mother, Mrs. Chun, watched Marcus during my night shifts all those years ago. The boys had grown up together like brothers. Now, he was my most trusted advisor, the only person in the company who knew the full truth about my identity and my relationship to Marcus. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Wellington?" David asked as we sat in my private meeting room on the 42nd floor, looking over the city where my son and daughter-in-law had shamed me just 3 days earlier. This is going to change everything. I looked at the employee files spread across the fancy table. Marcus Martinez, Regional Manager, Commercial Property Management Division. Yearly salary, $127,000. Performance reviews, always better than expected. Indigo Martinez, Marketing Director, Corporate Communications Division. Yearly salary, $118,000. Performance reviews, meets expectations with room for growth. They made their choice when they had me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party. I said, my voice steady. I've spent 43 years building this company, David. 30 years of that was to provide for Marcus, to give him chances, to create a future for his family. And this is how they repay me. David nodded slowly. He had heard the whole story, seen the hurt in my eyes when I had called him that morning after the party. What do you want me to do? Reorganization. I said simply, Wellington Industries is starting a new efficiency plan. We're making things simpler, getting rid of unneeded parts, and changing several departments to make things work better. The good thing about company changes is that they can be explained in so many ways. Budget problems, market pressures, competitive position. No one questions it when it's presented correctly. Marcus will be moved from regional manager to building maintenance coordinator. I continued, watching David's eyebrows go up. Same hours, different duties. His new salary will be $42,000 yearly. That's quite a drop, David noticed. Market rates for maintenance coordination. I replied coolly. Indigo will be moving from marketing director to facilities support specialist. $38,000 yearly. David was quiet for a long moment. Norma, he said, finally using my real name. They're going to know something's wrong. This isn't just a lower job. It's completely ruining their careers. No, I corrected him. Career ruin would be firing them. This is just moving them to a different spot. They'll still have jobs. They'll still have benefits. They'll still be able to provide for their family, just not at the level they've gotten used to. The truth was, I wanted them to understand what it felt like to struggle, to worry about money, to face the chance of losing everything they had taken for granted. I wanted them to learn humbleness the same way I had learned it 30 years ago when I was scrubbing office floors at midnight to keep food on the table. When do you want this to happen? David asked. Monday morning, I said, and David, I want it to be a complete surprise. No warning, no time to prepare. They should find out the same way they made me find out I wasn't welcome at my grandson's party. That weekend felt endless. I sat in my small living room, looking at the framed pictures of Marcus growing up, remembering every sacrifice I had made. The picture of him in his Little League uniform brought back memories of working double shifts to pay the sign-up fees. The one of him finishing high school reminded me of the extra hours I had put in to afford his class ring and graduation photos. I thought about the college money I had secretly saved for him through Wellington Industries, money he had never known existed, the money fund I had set up for Tommy's education, carefully put together so it couldn't be traced back to me, all the ways I had tried to take care of my family while staying hidden. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept imagining Marcus and Indigo getting ready for work Monday morning in their expensive apartment, completely unaware that their comfortable world was about to fall apart. Monday morning arrived gray and raining, perfect weather for what was coming. At exactly 9 a.m., David sent out the company-wide notice announcing company changes. At 9:15, department heads received their new organization charts. At 9:30, affected employees received individual email notifications. I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor, watching raindrops make paths down the windows, and waited for the explosion. It didn't take long. At 9:47 a.m., my assistant, Jennifer, buzzed the intercom. Mrs. Wellington, I have Marcus Martinez on line 3. He's asking for an immediate meeting with senior management about what he's calling an obvious error in his job status. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hearing my son's name spoken in my office in this way felt strange. Tell him that all restructuring decisions have been carefully looked at and approved by the owner. If he has concerns about his new position, he can talk about them with his direct supervisor. Yes, ma'am. 23 minutes later, Jennifer buzzed again. Mrs. Wellington, Indigo Martinez, is demanding to speak with someone in charge about what she's calling completely unacceptable and clearly unfair changes to her position. I closed my eyes, picturing Indigo's face when she had called me tacky, when she had had me let out like common trash. Same response. All decisions are final. By 10:30, both Marcus and Indigo had left frantic voicemails for every executive contact they could find in the company directory. By 11 a.m., they were calling in favors from coworkers, trying to reach someone higher up the company chain who could reverse what they assumed was some huge mistake. What they didn't understand was that there was no one higher than me, and this wasn't a mistake. David called at noon with an update. Marcus came to see me personally. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He keeps asking how this could happen, whether there's some kind of way to appeal if he did something wrong. What did you tell him? I told him that Wellington Industries is privately owned, and the owner has complete power over company decisions. I also mentioned that his new position comes with full benefits and that maintenance coordination is important work that the company values. I could picture my son's face, the confusion and hopelessness. Part of me wanted to end this game, to tell him the truth, to hold him like I did when he was little and scared. But then I remembered standing in that parking lot after being shamed at my own grandson's party, and my determination became stronger. How did he take it? He asked if I knew who made the decision. I told him all job changes ultimately come from Mrs. Wellington, but that she prefers to work through managers rather than getting involved directly in daily tasks. And Indigo, David? She's not handling it well. She's been telling anyone who will listen that this is clearly an act of revenge, that someone is against them personally. She says she's going to find out who's responsible and destroy them. The irony was perfect. Indigo was absolutely right. This was personal, but she was looking for an enemy in boardrooms and executive offices, never imagining that the person responsible was the same woman she had dismissed as beneath her notice. By 2 p.m., I learned through company gossip that both Marcus and Indigo had spent their lunch break on the phone with job recruiters and other companies trying to find new jobs. By 3 p.m., they had both sent formal complaints to Human Resources demanding investigations into what they said was clear unfair treatment. At 4 p.m., David appeared at my office door. They want to know about severance packages, he said quietly. If they can't get their old positions back, they're talking about leaving Wellington Industries entirely. I turned away from the window where I had been watching the city below. What did you tell them? That employees who quit lose any claim to severance money, and that Wellington Industries doesn't give recommendations for people who leave on their own unless specifically asked by the new employer. Smart man. David understood that I wasn't just punishing them, I was trapping them. In the current job market, with their sudden demotion on their records, finding equal jobs elsewhere would be almost impossible, especially without good recommendations from their current employer. They're scared, David continued. Marcus asked me directly if someone was trying to push them out of the company completely. What did you say? I told him that Wellington Industries values all its employees, no matter their job level. I said that many people have built successful careers in maintenance and facility support, and that these are stable, long-term jobs with chances to grow. That evening, I drove past their apartment building again. The valet was still parking cars, the doorman still opening doors for residents in expensive suits. I wondered how long Marcus and Indigo could afford to live there on their new combined salary of $80,000, less than Marcus alone had been making just that morning. I thought about Tommy, probably playing with his toys right now, unaware that his parents' world was falling apart around him. Would they have to move to a smaller apartment, change schools, give up the lifestyle that had made them feel so much better than his grandmother? As I pulled into my own driveway next to my 15-year-old Honda, I felt something I hadn't felt in many years. For the first time since Roberto died, I felt like I had control over my own future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Marcus and Indigo got used to their new reality. But tonight, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, 3 weeks into their new positions, the problems in Marcus and Indigo's perfect life were starting to show. I knew this because Wellington Industries was a close company, and news traveled fast when 2 former top workers were suddenly cleaning floors and emptying trash cans. David kept me informed about how they were doing, with his usual careful way of speaking. Marcus is struggling with the physical work, he reported during our weekly meeting. Yesterday, I saw him in the lobby cleaning windows. He looked very tired. I tried to ignore the pain in my chest. My son had soft hands now, clean nails, muscles that hadn't done real work in over 10 years. Of course, he was struggling. But then I remembered how my hands had looked after those first months of cleaning office buildings, cracked and raw from harsh chemicals, bleeding from scrub brushes, and my pity faded. And Indigo, she's having a harder time adjusting to the change in status, David said carefully. Yesterday, she had to clean the executive bathrooms on the 38th floor. When she ran into Patricia Steinberg from her old marketing team, Patricia didn't acknowledge her, just walked past like she didn't exist. I knew Patricia Steinberg. Ambitious, calculating, the type who only spent time with people who could help her career. The type who would have been all smiles and air kisses with marketing director Indigo Martinez, but wouldn't waste a glance on facilities support specialist Indigo Martinez. How is their work performance? I asked. Good enough, David replied. They show up on time, finish their tasks, but there's no excitement, no real effort. They're clearly just doing what they have to do while they figure out their next step. That was exactly what I had expected. They weren't learning humbleness or building character. They were just enduring this as a temporary setback while they planned their escape back to their former status. But what they didn't know was that escaping wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. I had spent 43 years building relationships in Chicago's business community. Wellington Industries had agreements with dozens of major companies, and I knew leaders at most of them personally. A quiet word here, a subtle hint there, and suddenly Marcus and Indigo Martinez's names were flagged in HR systems across the city. Not fully banned, exactly. That would have been too obvious, too easy to trace. But their resumes would somehow get lost. Their interviews would be put off indefinitely. Their references would be mysteriously unavailable when called. The beautiful thing about having real power is that you rarely have to use it directly. You just have to let people know it exists. 3.5 weeks after the changes, Jennifer buzzed my office. Mrs. Wellington, I have Indigo Martinez in the lobby. She's asking for a meeting with you personally. My breath caught. After all these years of carefully keeping Norma Martinez and Mrs. Wellington separate, my daughter-in-law was about to enter my private space. Did she say what this was about? She says it's about the recent job changes and what she calls obvious unfairness. She seems quite upset. I looked around my office, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows looking over the city, everything that screamed wealth and power, everything that proved I was exactly the opposite of what Indigo thought she knew about me. Send her up, I said. 10 minutes later, Indigo Martinez walked into my office. She was still beautiful, still perfectly groomed despite her new situation. But there was something different about her, a tightness around her eyes, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there at Tommy's birthday party, when she had been so confident, so cruel. She was wearing her old work clothes, an expensive suit that probably cost more than her new monthly salary, trying to keep up the appearance of success even as her world fell apart. Mrs. Wellington, she said, holding out her hand with that same fake smile I remembered from family gatherings. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't stand up from behind my desk, didn't offer her a seat, just looked at her with the same cold judgment she had once given me. Ms. Martinez, what can I do for you? I wanted to discuss the recent company changes, she said, still standing, still smiling that weak smile. I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding about my skills and value to this company. Have there been performance issues with your current position? I asked, neutrally. No, but she stopped, clearly expecting a different answer. Mrs. Wellington, I have a high degree from a top university. I've been in marketing management for 8 years. I made things more efficient by 23% during my time as director. Surely there's been some mistake. I leaned back in my leather chair, studying her. She had no idea who she was talking to. No recognition, no link between the powerful woman behind this huge desk and the tacky old woman she had shamed just a month ago. Miss Martinez, I said slowly, Wellington Industries makes job decisions based on current business needs and long-term goals. Your past performance, while good enough, doesn't give you the right to any particular position within the company. Her smile finally broke. Good enough? My performance reviews have always rated me as exceeding expectations. Meeting expectations? I corrected, having memorized every detail of her file. With room for growth. This is crazy, she snapped, her calm falling apart. Someone obviously has it out for me and my husband. This isn't about company changes. This is personal. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She was right. Of course, this was absolutely personal. But she was searching for an enemy she would never find because she had never imagined that the woman she had dismissed as beneath her notice could have this kind of power. Ms. Martinez, I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Wellington Industries is a privately owned company. The owner has complete power over all operational decisions. If you're not happy with your current position, you're free to look for work elsewhere. We've tried, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Something strange is happening. Marcus has had 6 interviews in the past 3 weeks, and every single chance has mysteriously disappeared. Companies that were eager to meet with him suddenly stop returning calls. It's like someone is sabotaging us, I said. I said nothing, just kept watching her with calm detachment. You have to know something, she pushed. This kind of planned effort doesn't happen by chance. Someone with real power is behind this. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, I replied smoothly. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out the puzzle. But she would never solve it because she would never consider that the answer was standing right in front of her. Is there anything else? I asked, reaching for the papers on my desk, in a clear sign of dismissal. Please, she said, and for the first time, I heard real fear in her voice. We have a 5-year-old son. We have responsibilities, commitments. I don't know what we did to deserve this, but surely there's some way to fix it. I looked up at her then, truly looked at her. This woman who had called me tacky, who had me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party like I was trash, who had spent years making it clear that I wasn't good enough for her family. Miss Martinez, I said quietly, sometimes people create their own problems. Sometimes the world has a way of teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I pressed the button on my intercom. Jennifer, please escort Ms. Martinez back to the elevator. As she was let out, Indigo turned back one last time. This isn't over, she said. I'm going to find out who's behind this. After the door closed, I sat in the quiet of my office, looking out at the city skyline. In the reflection of the window, I could see myself clearly, Norma Wellington, owner of a $42 million business, a woman who had built something amazing from nothing, not the tacky old woman Indigo thought she had dismissed, not Marcus's embarrassing mother, who didn't belong in their fancy world, just someone who had finally decided to stop hiding her true self. That evening, I drove through their old neighborhood, past the luxury apartment building where they could no longer afford to live. According to David's sources, they had given notice and were moving to a simple 2-bedroom rental across town. The kind of place where Tommy would have to share a bedroom with his parents, where there was no doorman or valet service, where the neighbors worked regular jobs and drove regular cars. The kind of place I had lived my entire adult life, even after I could afford much better. As I headed home to my small house, I wondered how long it would take them to put the pieces together. How long before they realized that their comfortable life had been built on the base of my success, and that I had simply chosen to stop supporting it. Tomorrow would mark 1 month since Tommy's birthday party. 1 month since they had learned what it felt like to have their world turned upside down without warning. But the real lesson was just beginning. 2 months after the changes, Marcus called me for the first time since Tommy's birthday party. I was sitting in my kitchen having my morning coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang at 7:23 a.m. Mom. His voice sounded empty, tired. Can we talk? I had been expecting this call, but hearing his voice still made my chest tighten. Of course, mijo, what's wrong? Everything, he said, and I could hear him fighting back tears. Mom, everything is falling apart. My job, our money, our whole life. I don't know what to do anymore. It took everything. I had to keep my voice neutral. What happened? You remember I told you I got promoted to regional manager last year? Well, they reorganized the company, and now I'm doing maintenance work, cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors. And Indigo, she went from marketing director to basically being a janitor, too. That sounds difficult, I said. It's not just difficult, Mom. It's impossible. We can't live on what they're paying us now. We had to move out of our apartment. We had to sell Indigo's car. We're barely keeping our heads above water. And I don't understand why this is happening to us. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times I had tried to call him over the past few years. All the family gatherings Indigo had found excuses to keep me out of. All the subtle ways they had made it clear I wasn't welcome in their fancy world. Have you talked to anyone at the company about it? That's the thing, Mom. Nobody will give us straight answers. They keep saying it's just company changes, but it feels personal, like someone is against us specifically. And when we try to find other jobs, the same thing happens. Great interviews, promising chances, then suddenly they stop returning our calls. Marcus paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. The worst part is how it's affecting Tommy. He keeps asking why we had to move. Why Daddy looks sad all the time. Why Mommy cries when she thinks he's not looking. He's only 5, Mom. He shouldn't have to see his parents like this. My grandson, my beautiful Tommy, whom I had only been allowed to see from a distance since that horrible day at his party. The thought of him confused and scared because his parents' world was falling apart made my heart ache. Marcus, I said softly, maybe you should consider that this might be a chance to think again about what's really important in life. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is a chance to remember what matters. Family, love, being there for each other instead of chasing high status and appearances. There was a long silence. Then Marcus said, Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. At Tommy's party, when Indigo had you leave, I should have stopped her. I should have stood up for you. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I realize I was a coward. I was so worried about making a scene, about embarrassing Indigo in front of her friends, that I let my own mother be shamed. The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. Why didn't you defend me, Marcus? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because I was ashamed, he said, and the honesty in his voice broke my heart. Not of you, Mom, of myself, of how I'd let Indigo convince me that we were better than our roots, better than where we came from. She made me believe that success meant moving away from anything that didn't fit the image we were trying to show. I felt tears building behind my eyes. This was the conversation I had been waiting for, but not like this. Not with my son, broken and desperate. And now, I asked, now I realized that image was built on sand. Everything we thought was solid. Everything we thought made us successful and important, it's all gone. And the only person who ever really loved me completely, who gave up everything to give me a better life, I pushed away because my wife was ashamed of her. I had to set the phone down for a moment and calm myself. When I picked it back up, Marcus was still talking. Mom, I need to tell you something else about the company I work for, Wellington Industries. I've been there for 12 years, and I never really thought about who owned it. It's privately owned, very secret ownership. But lately, with everything that's happened, I've been trying to figure out who's making these decisions about our lives. My heart started racing. I did some research, called in some favors with people in HR, and Mom, the weirdest thing, the company was started 43 years ago by someone named N. Wellington, started as a small cleaning business, and grew into this huge company. 43 years ago, Mom. That's right around the time Dad died. I gripped the phone, so hard my knuckles went white. And the more I dug into it, the more surprising things I found. The company's charity giving. It focuses on scholarships for children of single mothers. Its employee benefits are incredibly generous, especially for people with families. And Mom, they have this rule about hiring people from working-class backgrounds, giving them chances they might not get elsewhere. Marcus, I kept thinking, who builds a company like that? Who cares that much about families, about giving people chances? And then I remembered something. When I was applying for colleges, money just appeared. You said it was financial aid, but I never qualified for help based on need because you were working. When I got married, somehow our down payment for the apartment was exactly the amount we needed. When Tommy was born, his college fund mysteriously had money in it that we'd never put in. My hands were shaking. Now, Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Are you Mrs. Norma Wellington? The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. 43 years of carefully built separation between my two identities, and my son had figured it out through desperation and detective work. Yes, I whispered. Oh my God. His voice was barely heard. Mom, oh my God. The company where I work, where Indigo works, where we've been complaining about how we're treated, where we've been demanding answers from senior management. You own all of it. Yes. The reorganization that ruined our careers. The banning that's keeping us from finding other jobs. The systematic breaking down of everything we built. That was you. Yes. Another long silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, broken in a new way. Why? I took a deep breath, remembering the shame at Tommy's party, the years of quiet cruelty from Indigo, the way my own son had stood by and watched as I was treated like I was worthless. Because you let your wife have me thrown out of my grandson's birthday party, like I was trash. Because for years, you've allowed her to treat me like I was an embarrassment to your family. Because you needed to learn what it felt like to lose everything. The way I felt when you chose her over me, Mom. His voice completely cracked. I had no idea about the company, about how much you'd given up, about how much power you really had. Indigo thought. She thought I was just a poor old woman who didn't deserve respect. She thought I was beneath her notice. She thought she could shame me without results. But why didn't you ever tell me about the company, about the money, about everything you'd built? Because I wanted you to make your own way in the world. I wanted you to earn your success through your own effort, not because you were my son. I wanted you to build character and strength without the comfort of family wealth. But instead, I became proud and cruel. Not you, Marcus. You were a good man who got lost. But yes, you forgot where you came from. You forgot who raised you and how hard I worked to give you chances. I could hear him crying now, soft sobs that reminded me of when he was little and had scraped his knee or had a bad dream. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for the party, for not defending you, for letting Indigo make me think badly of you, for taking everything you gave me and never even knowing it. I know you are, mijo. What happens now? Are you going to destroy us completely? Are you going to make sure we never get back on our feet? I looked around my small kitchen at the simple life I had kept even while building a huge business, and realized something important. The anger that had driven me for the past 2 months was finally starting to fade, replaced by something more complex. That depends, I said quietly, on whether you've really learned what I was trying to teach you. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus, that I need to know you understand what love really means, what family really means, what respect looks like, and why it can't depend on someone's social status or bank account. I understand, Mom. I swear I understand. And Indigo? A long pause. I don't know if she does yet, but I'm going to make sure she learns. For the first time in months, I smiled. My son was finally coming home. 3 weeks after Marcus learned the truth, I sat in my office reviewing the employee files one more time. David knocked on my doorframe, holding a thick folder. "The papers you requested," he said, setting it on my desk. "Marcus and Indigo Martinez have both sent formal written apologies to the executive team. Marcus also included a personal letter asking for a meeting with Mrs. Wellington." I picked up Marcus's letter, reading his careful handwriting. In 3 pages, he explained not just his apology for the birthday party incident, but his understanding of a pattern of behavior that had grown over years. He admitted allowing his wife to create distance between us, confessed to putting social status over family loyalty, and took full responsibility for not defending me when I needed him most. More importantly, he wrote about the talks he had been having with Tommy, about teaching his son that love and respect are not earned through money or position, but through good character and kindness, about making sure Tommy understood that his grandmother wasn't someone to be ashamed of, but someone to be proud of. And Indigo's letter? I asked. David's expression was carefully neutral, less complete. She apologizes for any misunderstanding at the birthday party, and admits that her actions may have been inappropriate. She hopes that the family can move forward in a spirit of mutual respect. I almost laughed. Even in apologizing, Indigo couldn't bring herself to admit the full extent of what she had done. She was sorry for a misunderstanding and actions that may have been inappropriate. Not for years of planned cruelty. Not for treating me like I was beneath her notice. Not for the deliberate shaming of having me physically removed from my grandson's party. But perhaps that was enough for now. Perhaps true understanding would come later, if it came at all. "Schedule a meeting with Marcus for tomorrow morning," I said. "Just Marcus." The next day, my son walked into my office looking like a different person than the confident regional manager who had ignored his mother's shame 2 months ago. He was thinner, his hair grayer, his expensive suits replaced by the simple work clothes of his maintenance job. But there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years, humbleness and a desperate hope for making things right. "Mom," he said softly, and I heard the little boy he used to be, the one who would crawl into my lap when he was scared or hurt. "Sit down, Marcus." He sat in the chair across from my desk, looking around the office with new understanding. "All these years," he said, shaking his head. "All these years I worked in this building, got my paycheck from this company, built my career here, and I never knew you were the one making it all possible." "That was the point," I said. "I wanted you to succeed on your own effort. But I didn't, did I? I succeeded because you created opportunities for me, because you built a company that values family, that gives people from working-class backgrounds a chance to build something better. I succeeded because you loved me enough to stay invisible." I nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in my throat. "Mom, I need you to know that I've had a lot of time to think these past few weeks about Dad's death. About how hard it must have been for you to suddenly be responsible for everything. About how you worked those night shifts when I was little, how tired you always were, how you never had nice things because every penny went toward my future. You were my priority," I said simply. "I know that now, but somewhere along the way, I forgot. I let Indigo convince me that you were holding us back, that your lifestyle was embarrassing, that we needed to distance ourselves from anything that didn't fit the image we were trying to show." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "She used to make jokes about your house, about your car, about the gifts you brought to family gatherings. She'd say things like, 'Your mother means well, but she doesn't understand our world.' And instead of defending you, I started seeing you through her eyes." "Why?" "Because it was easier," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Because I was unsure about my own background. And it felt good to believe I'd risen above it, because Indigo made me feel fancy and successful, and I was afraid that admitting where I came from would somehow make what I'd achieved seem less. I watched my son struggle with the truth of what he had become, and I felt my anger finally starting to turn into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "What do you want now, Marcus?" "I want my mother back," he said without hesitation. "I want Tommy to know his grandmother. I want to rebuild what I destroyed through my own foolishness and pride." "And Indigo?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Indigo is struggling with this whole situation. She's angry about the job changes, confused about what happened to our life, and she's having a hard time accepting that the woman she dismissed is actually the person who controls our fate. Is she willing to change?" "I think she's willing to try. But, Mom, I need you to know that my relationship with you isn't dependent on hers. I've spent too many years letting my wife control my relationship with my family. That ends now." I studied my son's face, seeing the determination there, the real sadness for his actions. This was the Marcus I had raised, the one who had gotten lost somewhere along the way, but was finally finding his way back. "I'm not going to give you back your old jobs," I said, finally. His face fell slightly, but he nodded. "I understand. But I am going to create new opportunities for both of you, jobs that match your skills and experience, with salaries that show your value to the company. You'll have to earn promotions through your work, not through family connections, of course, and there will be conditions. Whatever you need." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a set of keys. "These are for the house on Maple Street. 3 bedrooms, nice neighborhood, good schools. I bought it years ago as an investment property, but it's been empty. Tommy needs stability, and you need a place where you can rebuild your life without the stress of high rent." Marcus stared at the keys. "Mom, I can't accept that. We've already taken so much from you without even knowing it. You're not taking it. You're borrowing it until you get back on your feet. And in return, I want Sunday dinners every week. Tommy, you, and me. We're going to rebuild this family the right way this time." Tears rolled down my son's cheeks. "What about Indigo?" "Indigo is welcome when she's ready to be part of a family instead of trying to control it. When she can treat me with the respect she'd show any other person, no matter their social status or bank account. She will," Marcus said quickly. "I'll make sure she understands." "No, Marcus, you can't make her understand. She has to choose to understand, just like you had to choose to remember who you really are." I stood up and walked around the desk, and for the first time in years, I hugged my son. He held me tight like he used to when he was little, and the world felt too big and scary. "I love you, mijo," I whispered. "I never stopped loving you, even when you forgot to love me back." "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so incredibly sorry. I know you are, and we're going to be okay." 6 months later, I sat in the backyard of the house on Maple Street, watching Tommy play on the swing set Marcus had built for him. My grandson ran over and climbed into my lap, talking about his day at kindergarten. He was completely comfortable with the grandmother he was finally allowed to know. Marcus appeared in the doorway, home from work at Wellington Industries, where he now served as Assistant Director of Employee Relations, a job he had earned through hard work and true dedication to helping other working families in the company. "Abuela," Tommy said, using the name he had started calling me. "Daddy says you have a big office in a tall building." "I do," I said, smoothing his hair. "Can I see it someday, when you're older if you want to?" "Will I work there, too?" I looked at Marcus, who was watching us with a calm look I hadn't seen on his face in years. "Only if you want to, and only if you earn it," I said. Indigo came out of the kitchen carrying a pitcher of lemonade. She still struggled with our new way of life, still sometimes made comments that showed her old ways, but she was trying. She had learned to say please and thank you when asking for favors, to include me in family decisions, to treat me like Tommy's grandmother instead of an inconvenience to be managed. It wasn't perfect. It might never be perfect, but it was honest. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, setting the pitcher on the patio table. "Should I call when it's time to eat?" "That would be nice," I said. "Thank you." She nodded and went back inside. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. As the sun set behind the trees, Tommy fell asleep in my lap. Marcus sat down beside us, and we watched the fireflies begin to dance in the growing darkness. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think Dad would be proud of who we became?" I thought about Roberto, about the man who had loved his family but died before he could see his son grow up, about the things he had left behind, and the things I had built in his absence. "I think he'd be proud that we found our way back to each other." I said, "I think he'd be proud that you're teaching Tommy about family and love and treating people with respect, no matter who they are. And are you proud of what you built?" I looked at the simple house, at my sleeping grandson, at my son, who had finally remembered what really mattered. I thought about Wellington Industries, about the hundreds of families it supported, about the chances it created for people like the woman I used to be. "I'm proud that I never gave up," I said. "On the company, on our family, on you, even when it seemed hopeless." Marcus reached over and took my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me." As darkness settled around us, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Not the peace of winning or getting back at someone, but the peace of coming home, of being valued, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The tacky old woman was gone. In her place sat Norma Wellington, the strong woman of a family that had finally learned the difference between love and high status, between respect and fear. And for the first time in decades, that was enough.